Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGeek webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is Road from Test Management to Test Program Management, Evolution of Testing as a Function from Resource-Based to Program-Based. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Srivatsan, Senior Vice President CTO of QAI India Limited. Srivatsan has over 23 years of experience in IT industry and 17 plus year experience in all aspects of testing, including test delivery management, setting up of testing centers of excellence, program management, and people development for customers across the globe. Prior to joining QAI, Srivatsan was heading the global workforce transformation for software testing practice at Cognizant and was the key member in building and implementing a 5-year strategic vision to transform workforce development. Before taking up this initiative of workforce transformation, Srivatsan played the role of director, business consulting practice and delivery head, testing healthcare practice at Cognizant. During this stint at Cognizant, Srivatsan was instrumental in completing 150 consulting engagements across 5 verticals and setting up of a core competency group for consulting and creation of industry standard assessment framework, and was responsible for business strategy, PNN hiring and enablement, and service conceptualization and delivery. As a former Global Review Manager for TMMI Foundation, Srivatsan has contributed to the development of appraisal methodology guidelines at TMMI Foundation and also the development of TMMI framework for high maturity testing organizations. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Mr. Srivatsan.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great opportunity to meet you through this wonderful forum, and I'm going to just start off with the topic which is a little different from conventional topics we go through. So today I'm going to talk about how testing from a precisely more delivery based or a resource based function moved into a complex program delivery based function. Now this evolution happened over the last 3 decades, so to say. Now if I have to talk about the brief agenda, I'm going to start off with something which you all very well know, which is testing then, which means how was testing before, and then how did test management evolve over a period, test management to test program management, how did the transition happen, what contributed to that. Now what it is today, how is test program management viewed today, that's the next one. Then we get into typical structure of a modern day test program. To manage this, what should a program manager know? Now it comes to the person more from a function. Then what will he do? You call somebody a test manager.
Hello.
We all know what he. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Srivatsan. Please share your slides view now.
It's shared.
No, I can see.
You can't see. What do I do to share? I'm sorry. I'm just trying. Oh, show my screen. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
It's now okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about the trouble.
It's okay.
So next we get into what does a test program manager do if he has to be designated as one, and then what are the skills he should possess to manage a large test program, and then coming to what would be his roles and responsibilities. Then fine, all this is okay. Now if I become a test program manager, what's my future? Where are the opportunities? And last but not the least, I want to say what is this all about and what it's not be construed as. With that, I'm quickly going to jump to the next slide. One second. How do I move to the next slide? I am losing control of my keyboard. I got it. Thank you. So testing was years back. It is just an activity in software development lifecycle. This I'm talking about 80s, where testing was not even considered as separate activity. There were no dedicated teams. All of us know pretty much all these points. But anyway, let me reiterate for the benefit of everybody, because I see a lot of future generation as part of this webinar. So for their interest, I am just taking them through this journey. So then the perception of anyone can test. It still remains today, but it was a lot more then. Then go no-go decisions, which generally testing should be making on behalf of the code, were never based on test results in those days. It was only based on what the management decided. Automation and tools existed, but nobody wanted to spend dedicated project effort because they felt it's too additional effort has been added and cost is being added. So, I mean, these are the days where testing wasn't recognized as a function. Then process was there, well defined, but then very little recognition, because they said anyway it's part of a project. Now why should you bring a separate documentation, separate process, separate metrics? Let's stop that. Finally, test management frameworks existed on paper, but adoption was very little. It was not as pronounced as it is today. So bottom line is, testing was a cost function. Every organization viewed testing as a cost. They said there's no value from testing. So this was the perception in early days. Now I'm going to talk about next. Now we saw where testing was. Now we will also see how this test management came in, what was the cycle it went through. Now 80s, testing projects were hard to come by, which means there were no dedicated testing projects. Again, we talked about it in the previous slide. It's just a smaller manifestation of that. And test efforts were only managed by project managers. Okay. So testing was just an activity in 80s. Come to 90s, there was a little bit of a shift. People started talking about test processes. They said, oh fine, we should have a test plan. We should talk about having a estimation, at least gut feel, and then talk about a few measures in terms of defects, in terms of quality. So that's what gave rise to early metrics, and then it became, though it was still part of SDLC, but now the difference was testing resources were augmented instead of testing being an activity. So slight improvement. Next step is, 90s. Mercuries and Rationals, today's HPs and IBMs came more prominent with good, robust test management tools, automation tools, performance tools, and they started certifying people on tools. So as well, industry certifications a little bit started here and there. So increased market value for test professionals. So I remember in mid 90s and late 90s, when I was starting my career, there was a big demand for people who knew rational robot, and there was a big demand for people who knew Mercury tool, Mercury interactive tool. So this was actually the norm of the day in those days, and they were billed at better rates than standard functional testers. So which leads us to believe that there was prominence to technology, and a slight tilt towards independent testing started coming, because specialized functions started getting into testing life cycles such as automation and performance. Now those were the 90s. Come turn of the century, we saw independent testing becoming more and more prominent, because business, market conditions, customer demands, a lot of other factors contributed to QA being the gatekeeper for code, which started putting the CIOs, CXOs, the heads of quality assurance, they started thinking, let's start looking at having independent people looking at our code. I mean, anyway, this was the norm we follow for our traditional process audits, where we bring in an external auditor to see how an organization is performing. So on the same lines, they mimicked this one, where they said, let the code quality be decided by somebody else. And then it started turning into outsourcing slash offshoring, which means augmentation was partially there, but then it became an independently augmented organization, better than what it was before. And then test life cycle came into picture, because there was a large set of people working in a single testing project, and they wanted to track, have their own plans, have their own estimates, rule over the quality of code, talk about defect tracking and triaging, and all those things came into picture. So the matured independent testing organizations started evolving. People started building very robust process frameworks. Next generation tools started coming. Now you have QTPs of the world and rational functional testers of the world all started evolving in the 2000s. Now then you are also, most important thing that happened towards early 2000s, mid 2000s should I say, testing spawned off as careers. People started having career paths where tester grew into a lead, into a test manager, into a test director, or whatever you want to call it as. So those were the traditional roles, and most of the tier 1 large organizations started adopting this model, which became then independent testing practices, and they themselves became profit centers from where it was a cost center. Now this era, after that, as we are speaking, complex programs, large testing projects, where, and I'll go into the reasons of why this came in as we go through the presentation. But then today's world is completely different. You have complex test management workflows. You have to manage large group of testing projects. And today a single testing piece is managed, spread across multiple testing vendors. So the multi-vendor engagement, in addition to pressing business demands. Now this evolution resulted in large deals, spike in technology skill needs, because you talk about mobility, big data, cloud, you talk about host of things today. Everything is now manifested into testing, your SOA, your agile, so that becomes more complex. Then program management and consulting evolved to, then this led to transformation of test organizations. So if you look at this evolution, it started from nowhere in 80s, and today it's become a very, very complex and an integrated function. Now keeping this in mind, I'm just going to skip to the next slide, which is again a small story of, we saw test management, we saw testing. Now let's see how test management became test program management, what contributed to it. Now I only listed a few factors, and I'm sure all of you will have more factors to add when it comes to attributing the emergence of test program management. But let's discuss some key pointers. Now first thing is moving away from a resource-based into project-based delivery. That is the first step, because the large tier 1 and mid-sized to large-sized players started pushing towards independent testing. Not only independent testing, but they said we'll do it in a project based and not on a resource based. So the change in the customer perception started coming. Automation, non-functional testing became independent lifecycle elements, because projects were large, projects were many, so they needed more people with these skill sets. Obviously, then it became an essential lifecycle by itself within the test lifecycle. Next evolution. Third one, large testing outsourcing, multi-million-dollar deals leading to multiple projects being under one roof, which means customers were going on investing huge amounts of money in product development, outsourcing application testing, maintenance, everything. So they said, I don't want to talk to 50 people. Get me one roof where I want all testing projects to be integratedly run. So now this is slowly evolving moving into a program model rather than dealing with hundreds of testing projects. Then after this is at the project level. Now come to stakeholder management. You are talking about many to many relationships. We have internal account teams, sales teams, delivery teams, development teams, customer business teams, technology teams. I mean, there are a host of people involved in a large project, especially multi-million dollar project. So now if this is the case, they wanted to build a new model where they say, let us group all functions related to testing under one roof and have one person face the customer, so it becomes easy for managing expectations. Fine. Now why all this happened? Because mergers and acquisitions, consolidations of application infrastructure. Now this started bringing in more and more large banks buying out each other, insurance companies buying out each other. So it became large corporations from being smaller ones. So multiple instances of this resulted in huge landscape for testing, and you know what happens in a merger situation where application rationalization, functionality rationalization, so many things has to happen. So this resulted in a huge additional governance capability for testing teams, because they have to manage the business, the testing, the technical, the infrastructure, all those things. Now, lastly, large investments in testing, leading to compulsory value proposition, because customer is investing millions of dollars. So come first year, they started asking, what about my ROI? Where are you going to maximize it? Are you identifying levers? They don't believe that process standardization, productivity improvements, and automation are no longer the areas for optimization. They are looking at rounded off optimization. They want infrastructure optimization, operational optimization. Many things are coming. So they wanted a single window governance, which is to take care of all the things. So you see how from a resource-based, project-based, it moved into a program model. So test management also evolved with all these changes. Now let me stop here on the slides for a second, and I'll tell you, all of us have gone through this journey. We all know what is happening. But why I wanted to do this session is fundamentally for everyone to understand that this role is essential for future. We are changing by the day, by the minute. Technology is evolving, complexities are increasing, and competitive edge is becoming really, really tight. So with this, to deliver the best value, we have to start looking at how to better manage the whole thing, because delivery happens, everybody delivers. The question is, how do we manage it more efficiently? And that is the reason why this evolution is taking us into the discussion which we are in today. Now, going to the next one. Now, we have talked about evolution. Let's come to present day. What is it all today, right? I mean, today if you look at it, testing is no longer a simple on-site offshore project. Testing is today looking at testing delivery models like TCOs, test factories. People are talking about testing as a service, which is TaaS, which is hosted on cloud. Then you are talking about captives running dedicated offshore test centers. So all these are manifestation of large testing outfits where consolidation of testing happens under one roof. Next is technology. Testing is now mobile testing. You have testing on cloud. You have big data warehousing. You have devices. Medical device testing, handheld devices for retail customers, medical devices for healthcare and life sciences clients. So all this has now become part of quality assurance. Now this adds to the complexity of the testing engagement. Next, global teams. Now if you look at today, people are saying traveling too many people to on-site becomes a cost overhead. So how do we manage virtual teams? Virtual team management has now become the norm. People are talking about having virtual teams spread in China, in Argentina, and in India, and the US, and virtual program manager managing all these people via their chats and videos and web-based management. So this is the future, and I think we have to be prepared to get into that as well. So this is another emerging trend. Now, most important, multi-stakeholder management. Let's look at a simple test engagement. Let's say it's a 150 member engagement. We are talking about multiple vendors doing it for the same client because client wants to be risk averse, number one. Then infrastructure and support functions, which means release, configuration, change. They have to be aligned close to testing. Vendor management and PMO, very important people. They decide your budgets. They decide how much business you get. Business and technology stakeholders on the client side, extremely important. Internal account teams, executive management, and of course your own teams. So look at the number of people an individual has to deal with. Now if you have 15 different people talking to these 15 different groups, there will not be any communication coordination, and I think you lose the sanity of the whole engagement. Now that is leading us into the discussion now. Finally, multiple hundreds of projects sometimes, you have to manage each project independently, but then articulate the value as a single entity. Value articulation is no longer your dashboards. Value articulation is now talking about cost efficiencies, operational efficiencies, strategic innovations. You are talking about more and more IP development. So a lot of these new elements are kicking in into test engagements. So all this becomes part of what you call as a program management structure today. So this now leads us to the next slide, where I'm going to talk about how is a test program looking today. Let me take a pause here and tell you, not every single program is of this size. Okay, I'm talking about large complex programs which has about 100 plus or even 70 plus sometimes, and I'm sure all the organizations are growing and they will all on one day start hitting this size. So if that is the case, what should we be prepared with in terms of managing these engagements? Is what is the intent of it. So today's expectation from my basic experience of dealing with the hundreds and hundreds of customers globally, they are looking at a program, testing program, typically to have a strategic layer where it takes care of the planning and governance of the whole program. It takes off visioning and how to run this program, because that's very important. You remember, customers are betting on you to run the program for them, which comes with a baggage, which means you are to ensure that you run it like how they do it. So you need a vision to do that. Then you have to plan it out, you have to manage cost and finances, you have to manage stakeholders, and of course the program manager's responsibility today is to be an advisor to the client whenever it's required. So all this sticks into the strategic layer, where when the engagement governance is formed, this is how typically it is done. I'm not saying this is cast on stone, but this is one of the models which is worked for a lot of clients. Next is your back office, which is your test management office, where you talk about demand and capacity. As we step back a little in our conversation, I told you these are large engagements, 70 plus, 80 plus, or 100 plus sometimes, and even 500 plus a lot of times. So these constantly require people, and constantly projects get over. So they cannot keep people fully, for 365 days. They should know when to add and when to release. So that's what your demand capacity planning comes into picture. You have your planning process tools management important, environment support function coordination. Then you define the strategy, you define the life cycle. So there is a central layer that will take care of all this, which means there are roles for people to play in each of these layers. Now you also simultaneously look at how many roles you will be able to create through testing engagements, which anyway you will have a series of test managers otherwise, but you can better their roles and make them play more strategic roles, giving different dimensions. So then it looks at test planning standardization, estimation standardization, and this is from a life cycle standpoint. Now from service organization standpoint, it looks like the deal management and business development. I believe every senior person, 10 to 15 years, they are entrusted with the responsibility of business development and account mining, and that requires deal management and business development support skill. So every new deal that comes from this customer, this layer has to be responsible for structuring the deal, costing, and also putting up the proposal. And then you look at a project management layer, standard, and then reporting. And finally, the people management support in terms of careers, appraisals, and all those things. So this is a very operational layer where people here will be very less, but they will be doing multiple functions. Finally is your delivery organization who does standard stuff like test execution, project management, day-to-day alignment, automation, and all those stuff. So I'm not going to elaborate on that. So the reason why we are thinking of a modern program in different layers is basically to make it more efficient, number one. Number two is to make sure that people have roles to play and people grow from one layer to another over the course of the engagement. And trust me, most of these engagements are multi-year deals, so they expect you to have this vision of creating a governance like this, a structure like this, and then create a testing program. So we are slowly seeing the manifestation of what today is the structure of a test program and what will be the role of this person who's managing this entire thing. I mean, you are looking at what skills. Now that's a $1 million question. And when I was with Cognizant, we built a program management charter for all the people who are in managing medium to large size accounts, and it was kicked off as a year-long program. So now, based on those experiences and based on what we have seen with large testing clients, there are certain skills that is mandatory, and I am sure we all will appreciate that it is no longer simply knowing functional testing, simply knowing what is automation, how to do ROI, what is non-functional testing, how to write a strategy, how to do an estimate. No, here we are talking about managing an organization. That's what is the complexity of testing projects, programs today. So we definitely require program management skills, which is executing complex programs, quantifying benefits as they realize. It's a very important thing. Negotiation skills, absolutely important. Relationship and opportunity management. This is critical for a program manager because he has multiple arms under him. He has to manage relationship on one side with that, on the other side with the client, and also look at what new opportunities will emerge in that place or the customer's allied organizations as well. So that is more like an account mining function. So program management skills, complex program execution requires transition management and a whole lot of things. So that is important. Then more importantly, you have to internally see what your organization can bring to the table rather than inventing new things. A lot of times we don't look into our organization as long as somebody tells us it is important to see. So here we are talking about what is the service capability, who are the people in governance positions so we can leverage their offices to make things work for the customer. Delivery is important, vision and strategy of the organization, which means wherever you are taking your organization, which means when you are going with the market trends and industry trends, it's expected that you have to take your customer along with you. That's what it is. Then finally looking at your operations and finance, which is your profitability, which is your utilization, all aspects. Now comes the third and fundamental skill, which is your advisory and consultative capability, which means you are not a project manager, you are now an engagement manager, and customer expects you to tell, because he's handed over the responsibility to you, he expects you to tell him what to do when, what not to do, which means you have to be very influential with the client. And conflict resolution is very important because, as I told you, we are talking about multi-vendor, multi-organization situation. So conflict resolution is very important. Consultative selling and executive connect. You have to know the top guys. You have to be telling them how much of returns, how much of value testing program is bringing to the customer organization, more than saying how much your organization takes to them. That means you have to speak the business context of the client. So next is consultative solutioning. You talk about on difficult situations, how do I become an advisor? How do I tell the customer what to solve? It's not about selling our own products or services, but to solve customer business problem through consultative solutioning. And you're talking about a business case. That is a very important thing. Everybody will want it. So people are going to say, what is the business case? I'm sure that all of us might have heard this over and again, where we come and say, hey, I don't know how to build a business case. But then given all this, you have measurements, you have metrics coming from all over the place, you have operations and finance data. So building a business case should never be an issue. And that is why all of these have to come under a single umbrella. And finally, you should be able to understand and appreciate the customer's IT strategy and how do you map it to the QA vision, because today IT strategies are planned with or without QA. It is optional, but that can never be the case because most of the dollars you are spending are going to come into QA. So when there is so much of millions of dollars of spend, how not a strategy can be without it? So you have to get there. Finally, the leadership skills, transformational skills, essential, important baseline. So this is required, where you exhibit thought leadership, you take industry trends to them, talk about analyst reports, share it with them, give them the trends. So all this is part of a program manager's job today, because this is how you are evaluated in a day-to-day situation, and this is how you will be also evaluated in future, because the expectation of the customer is no longer simple and straightforward, and nor are the test organizations that are set up have these expectations. So when we are evolving, we have to start acquiring some of these skills as we go by, and most of us would have, but then the leverage and the role has to be created. So I'm also using this forum to request the organizations to start creating these roles so that people can grow into a complete program manager for testing dedicated. Now the question can come as to how it is different from normal program management. Normal program management has comparatively less stakeholders than testing has got, and the focus is not on a single area, it is across the board. So even if your overall program has a program director, you will still need somebody to man testing, because testing becomes a bigger part in your whole schemes. So with this, I'm just going to give a list of what are the responsibilities, and it's just a checklist, program governance, test management, customer expectation, advisory support, account mining, career. So you can just skim through this and see. These are typically the examples of what he or she as a program manager will deliver. Because now if you see these roles and responsibilities, this will be nowhere close to what a test manager will do. So that should give us a feel of what is expected out of a test program manager and what kind of skills he or she possesses. And if those skills are acquired over a period of time, typically what roles will they play in a large program which they are managing is what this slide tells you all about. I'm not going to get into the details of this because this is very straightforward. Now I'm just going to give 1 second for this slide to load. Okay, I see it going. Now fine, we have talked about evolution, we have talked about how it looks today, we have talked about what a test program management model looks like. We have also talked about what actually contributes to it and how people will grow into what. We have talked about their roles. Now I know questions will come to me saying, okay fine, what if I acquire all this? What does it mean to me? So I took some good solid industry data which came out of the World Quality Report just to highlight a few opportunities which I will sum as to how it turns into an opportunity for each one of us as we speak. Now this report clearly states the following points. Higher investments on TCOE kind of models, which means there are going to be more and more TCOEs. When you talk of a TCOE, it is more of consolidation, more of enterprise function. So that requires a test program director or a manager to manage, number one. Second point, 41% of test spend is going to be towards transformational activities, which means we are talking about high value work. Because if you go and sell to a customer that I will deliver a zero defect code, that's no longer a selling point for us today. Today's selling point is as to what value can you additionally bring to me and who are the individuals who's going to bring that value. That is what you call as transformation. A transformational initiative can be driven only by people who have been through it, been there and done it. So that's where you have an opportunity where you can become a program manager and start advising the customer on transformational needs now. Then outsourcing is going to still go from 43 to 46% by 2015, which means larger, more outsourcing work requires more management across multiple stakeholders, one more opportunity. Now next point is very interesting. Every one of us know TCOE, everybody talks about it, but the report states only 6% of the companies have fully functional TCOE. That means look at the number of opportunities we have to create more and more TCOEs, which we are talking about almost a $20 to $25 billion industry, and 6% companies are only TCOE. So there comes an opportunity for us to be prepared for future and create people for this need. Then the next aspect is 59% of testing budgets are going to be spent on client-facing applications, which means you are talking about no maintenance work, no internal projects or products, but you are client-facing, which means they have to be well managed and they have to be well executed. That requires a fantastic integrated program management view. Now, apart from this measurements, all of us know this is no rocket science. Again, same thing, reduce time to market, cost, better resource management, quality, same stuff. But the last point is slightly different. Improved QA agility to support business objectives, which means if there is a technology transformation program or if there is a business transformation program, then QA has to be ready. So how do you make the QA organization prepared? That is the responsibility of a senior program manager who is going to come in on behalf of the customer, drive this whole initiative. So like I said earlier, all these indicators clearly emphasize the need for globally managed, highly operationally efficient, exceptional delivery under one umbrella. So this sums up the future also. Here we talk about, okay, I have got so many things to talk about, but at the end of it, I also know if I invest today, I mean organizations, if they invest today in this skill, it's a longer term benefit for sure. Because when we get into a situation where we have to start building this capability, business will hit your door and underpreparedness is going to shoot you in the feet. So this is what is the outcome of the whole thing. Now, last summary, it's simple, straightforward, what it is and what it's not. When I'm saying that this is a strategic role, and this straight away puts you in the QA governance board, which means you are, if in the governance structure, a test program manager will be equivalent to a person sitting in the QA head probably, or a VP of IT, something like that. And it is going to drive large size, big budget programs under a single window. So you have to cut across customer organization, your organization as well. So you should have a reach. Then you have to leverage all industry technology trends to drive the customer engagements. Otherwise, if you are not in par with the speed with the industry, you will not be able to take those into the customer organizations. Then comes absolute single point accountability to deliver the commitments across the enterprise, and all these commitments are to be delivered with defined outcomes, or SLAs you call it as. So this person's head will be the single neck to choke. Then it also brings in the advisory flavor to the customer. So you have to be a trusted advisor to the client, so that thereby creating a value added partnership. And finally, you are the top escalation point. You cannot look back and say my manager will take care. So executive management is your next point. That means you are the key stakeholder for this. So this is what is the positioning of a program manager. And what it is not, and it's simple to say, it's not a project test manager where you will only report defect, test case pass fail. It is not resource and operation management where you say I want 5 people today, I'll release 5 people tomorrow. It is not about planning and estimating. It's not about I do my job, somebody else will do their job. No, you are responsible for everything under testing. You cannot say that defect is not fixed, that is development's responsibility. It is still your responsibility to ensure that you manage the stakeholders well and get the defects fixed and test it and send it across. Finally, you have to be fully and 100% engaged with the customer very tightly, unlike the cases where you have only weekly calls to express your status. So this is the final, and I have given all the inputs as far as what this topic is going to be. Now the takeaway finally for 1 minute, if I sum up, it is an emerging area. It is going to have a lot of importance in the next 2 to 4 year time frame when market opens up and when we have more and more larger testing projects and multi-dimensional technology and testing work coming. This will serve as a important role for the organizations to go with. Secondly, building a lot of people who are senior in the organization, who are emerging, who are capable, building them into these roles will also position them well for consulting led delivery. So this gives an opportunity for us to create a career option for testing folks as well. So with this, I take a great I take this opportunity to thank TechGig for giving me this time, and I thank you all for taking time in your busy working day, in the middle of the day, and sitting through this. I'm open to questions. Thank you so much.
Right. Thanks for the insightful presentation. Let's quickly take up the questions now. Please read out the questions and their answers so that all users may listen to the commendable insights.
Okay, I have a question from Kavita M. In order to know the manager point of view, what he has in mind, how will he get to know? This question is kind of vague to me. I'm saying in order to know the manager point of view, what he has in mind, how will he get to know? I think this is more in terms of, if I'm answering it right, I'm not sure. Kavita, you may probably want to write me an independent mail on what this is. I'm still not able to get the crux of this question. But I'll tell, it's more to say, if the manager's point of view needs to be known, I think that is again building transparency. It is very, very important. Okay. So then if the team is coordinated and everything is in single governance, all this will work. Pankaj Giridhar has asked me a question saying, compared to development person moving into a program delivery, why is this? Compared to development person moving into program delivery manager role, why is this? See, that is the myth. Okay, everybody thinks program management should be run by development. My view on that is, it can be development as long as they are able to embrace testing, because this is very important. You have to be in and out of testing. You should know how to, quantify the value, talk about, what value will come in terms of running an engagement, which means you have to be jack of all trades. You should know performance, you should know security, you should know mobile, which means a development manager can be a good program manager by managing stakeholders and managing the project, but if it comes to technical queries, this is going to be a problem. So my thought is a solid background in testing is going to really help a lot, and that is the reason why I am pushing for test organizations to invest on this. Mujahid Sheikh, what are the common challenges faced by test program managers? So challenges is again, multifold. So you have challenges within your organization, you have challenges outside your organization as well. So this role has to be first defined and bought by people, which means everybody should believe that there has to be trust. A lot of times what happens is testing team will name somebody as a program manager, but then other stakeholders don't buy it. They say, why don't you send this guy? Why don't you send that guy? So the challenge is first internal stakeholder buy-in. Second thing is when you position him to the client, it is very important that this person has to fit the role and they have to be skill baseline. Otherwise, if you look at the skill sets I have mentioned, it will tell you it is a very, very important factor. Otherwise, just by virtue of experience, years of experience or knowledge, this role cannot be taken. Okay. Then the next one I am going to do is Mahesh D. What are the common challenges? Okay, Mahesh D. Basically, test management. Yes, test management does come under test program management. There is no doubt. Okay, Amit Athalye, what sort of experience is needed? I have given you the skills. If you want to ask me for years of experience, I would suggest you have to be slightly gray-haired or bald. I mean, to put it in crude sense. Otherwise, minimum 10 plus years or 12 years, I should say. We should have handled large engagements. We should have seen some testing projects where failures have happened, and we should have sorted it out. That's what helps you a lot. And more importantly, you should have been strong customer-facing person. Otherwise, it's difficult. Santanu, could you please emphasize methodology integration like Agile? Yeah, Agile methodology integration is again one facet of this role. I don't think I can take that as a offshoot thing. When you integrating Agile, yes, it is like bringing in a new lifecycle model, a new technology. The program manager should know what changes have to be done, what reskilling has to be done, what level of change the customer has to go through in order to implement this. And if he is aware of the landscape and the capability, I think this should never be a problem, right? Is this method recognized by all? Gurnashekar and yes, I don't think so. It is in large companies, these roles are emerging. It is not recognized at the moment, but if all of us put an effort to start making this a recognizable role, it will get there. Please suggest some open source test management tool. Bhaskar Kumar, I'm sorry, I have no background to this because I'm not in the techie guy, but I will definitely communicate this with you. You can send me a separate email. I'll get you what are the list of open source test management tools that are available. What percentage of estimated budget? Okay, the thumb rule typically is based on effort. This is by Sudakshina Basu. It's generally budget is efforts are the same, right? You talk about 25 to 35%, but people say in a IT spend, typically, from what I have seen, 14 to 18% is what they spend on testing, which does not include unit testing. Okay, that I have to be very clear. This is my experience. Numbers could be different. Next is Kinshuk Banerjee. As an individual, how to chart a roadmap to enhance? Very good. So you need a career architecture that helps you to do this, Kinshuk, which means your organization has to have clear career architecture roadmap for every individual, which will say assess your current skill baselines and then tell where you will go from here. So that will determine what are the skill gaps you have to become this and what skills you should possess in order to get to that role. And today, the norm of the day is lot of larger organizations are embarking on career architecture. As a matter of fact, QAI also does career architecture work for a lot of clients. Okay. Rama Bidarkar, how do you handle the challenge of multi-stake collaboration? Well, that's a topic by it, Rama, because I think multi-stakeholder management is again it's not a one-word answer. Again, it comes through a lot of experience, and there are specific courses that are offered by even top business schools to do multi-stakeholder management. I would recommend you look into those primarily. PMP certification will help laying, well, certifications and Sudhir Kumar B. Certifications are not a bearing for this role, in my opinion. Without certification, if you have the required expertise and the skills that I have mentioned, I don't think certifications are a big necessity for you to prove. I mean, PGMP I would say would help you more than PMP, if I have to say that. Okay. Ashok PM is an opportunity for starting an organization for test program management. Well, that becomes a supplier organization. Well, yes, that's a good thought. If you want to, build a pool of test program managers by investing on hiring a set of 20 people, training them, that is possible. But think about how much investments you have to make. That is important. Santosh Sahu, how important is an independent test program manager? The organization does not have budget for it. See, this is an oxymoron, right? If you don't have budget, then don't even think about it, because my point is you can have shared test program manager. If you don't have budgets, there are two ways to look at it. One, you may not be able to hire somebody, that's a budgetary constraint. Two, probably you will not be able to cross bill somebody from a development or other teams. In this case, you have to take people on loan, and the other organization, maybe a development or some other organization within your company, should be willing to transfer that person for you for X amount of period, provided they are skillful to deliver this job. Again, this is not based on the person, this is based on the context of testing. So keep this in mind. Okay. Then next is what is the ideal structure of TCOE? Prasad Gundu. There is no ideal structure, boss. Everybody constitutes TCOE very differently, and this is again a topic by itself for a webinar. Maybe we will do one for that. Okay. Deepak Nawkar, what one needs to become head of TCOE? Well, head of TCOE, whether it's a program manager, I'm not sure. But if you look at that skill, that should be more than enough for you to be a head of TCOE. Again, TCOE is contextual. We have to define what a TCOE is, then we will take it. Okay. Chetan Dalal, we are a small startup. Our clients have no past experience on any test process. Does this scenario require a program manager? I don't think so. If it is very small, less than 20-30 people, don't invest in such roles, because it becomes an overhead, though it is an advantage. The point is you will not be able to quantify the value you are demonstrating, primarily because this guy will take bulk of your cost. So be cautious. Maybe you can create a toned down version of a test program manager and have him be accountable. That is possible. Okay. Amit Atyale, how much testing experience is needed? I told you already. Why people take this as career enhancement? Rashmi Ranjan Farida. Well, this is definitely a career enhancement, because you will no longer be seen as one among the 100 test managers there. You will be seen as somebody who's doing something very strategic, which is more customer facing, and which is also a very large role which only very little people can play. Even if your organization has 10-15,000 people in testing, how many clients will you have? 300-400 clients. So only that many program managers can be there. So this is definitely an aspiration for a good test manager to be there, and I will say that it has to be an aspiration for somebody to grow into the next level. How different is from manual testing? I don't think I can answer this, because manual testing has got nothing to do with this. Manual testing is one type of testing within this, that's all. Sudhakar Saligram, how does task fit into Agile? It's not in the context of this discussion. I'll take it separately. How to engage management in TCOE concept? Oh, okay. Amit Vardhaman. If you want to engage management into TCOE, that means you need to do two things. One, either you build a business case and show them that is values coming out so that they believe. Second thing, I will also say, if you start a TCOE without a management buy-in, that is actually not going to work, because anything consolidation activity should be top down. It cannot be bottoms up. Okay. Next is there a difference between test programming for consulting companies like Cognizant and so? No, absolutely. Ruben Raj, it's a very valid question. In my opinion, profile wise it doesn't change, but nature of projects could change because a Google or a Yahoo have internal projects, so their stakeholder management is comparatively lesser as opposed to the Cognizance and TCSs of the world. Okay. So Chintan Patel, how do most effective test cases are transparent? Oh no, this is a very operational question. I'm sorry. How is this role different from account manager? Hemant Kumar. Account managers are only responsible for managing the business. They are not responsible for, they are not accountable for delivery. They are not accountable for, what testing brings to the table, and I don't think they are going to go be advisors to the clients at any points. Account managers are typically positioned as client executives who will mind the customer and bring opportunities, that's all. But test program manager will have an account management job included in that. It's the other way around. Okay. Chintan Patel, okay, Hemant Kumar, Haribabu Manikam. What's the minimum experience? It's 10 to 12 years. I told that minimum, more than that possibly. Conventional structural TCOE where the multiple testing projects are on. Yes, it does. It can be a TCOE or it can be called anything, but I call it as a test program so that it is more generic. Okay. Then next is how can a test program give a latest trends? Latest trends you are on the internet, and today's internet is the best source for you. You be on LinkedIn, you be on Twitter, you subscribe for testing reports. I think that will give you insights into what the trends are. I mean, analyst reports. If your organization get access to that, please look into analyst reports. They are the best ones to give you. Okay. How do I visualize test positioning in the reporting number of test program? Well, Prasad, that is a governance. It depends on the organization, and you should have a governance structure depending on how your TCOE is being set up. Okay. So I think I have time for probably 2 more questions. Yeah, this is a good one. Sakshi Bharadwaj. Is this role available only in companies having separate test department? No, it can also be in product companies and internal IT companies. But your role manifestation would be slightly lesser as compared to opposed to independent testing. Okay. Is there an industry accepted standard methodology for test program? Priya Mathur. Priya, whatever I showed you on the slide is probably what most of the organizations look at least the large ones. So for now, you can take that, but I'll tell you even testing as a whole does not have a lot of industry standards. So, we have to get there first. Okay. Did companies start implementing test program? What are the new positions available? Samir Gawande. There is no implementation, it's creation of roles. And almost the tier 1 companies have started putting it into practice, and I'm sure opportunities will come when you start looking out. But these opportunities are typically not advertised unless or until there is bad dearth of talent inside the organization. And large companies typically don't run into this problem. So my suggestion is you wait, grow your organization, maybe you will get a role to play earlier than that. Okay. No certification programs, Rohit, as such, I don't think so. Rohit Kumar. How does this role session customer Q&A governance board? Rashmi Rajan Panda. Okay, definitely that is positioning. When the customer gives you such a large engagement and make you accountable, why will he not accept a single point contact from you? And when your single point contact is responsible for running his entire testing outfit, obviously he has to call the shots. Otherwise, you can tell the client that, then it becomes more like a body shopping model where I give you the person and you make decisions. That's not going to work. So the positioning is important and you have to position it that way. Otherwise, this role has no value. So the last question I'm going to take, let me see. Being a QA lead, no. Okay, is test program, Sajita Radhakrishnan. Is test program management one level above test management? It is multiple levels above. It need not focus on the client and resources. As I told you, if you look at what are the 3 layers of the testing program that will tell you what is the breadth and width of roles they have to play. So that is very evident. Maybe if I share the presentation, I think you will all will understand more about it. So I think it's 4 o'clock. I'm going to stop, and I'll maybe work with TechGeek to see how best I can answer all your questions. Okay. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate this number of questions that has come, and it has also given me a lot of thought process in terms of how to rethink this whole thing. Thank you so much.
I'm really thankful to our guest speaker for conducting this webinar. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of the webinar will be available on techgeek.com by tomorrow. Thank you all.